I thought the two of you already knew my life story.
No, we want to hear it again. We're fact checking.
There'll be no fake news happening here today. Who I see in the crowd, I'll tell you that. The majority of them know me for as long as I've been here. So
welcome everybody to our second 2020 Human Books here at the Flin Flon Public Library. Of course, you all know that Culture Days, I think that they were almost talking about cancelling it, and then also at the last minute it was like, no, we're going ahead with it. Elizabeth, what can you do? And oh yes, by the way, it's the whole month of October, not just one weekend. So we decided that we'd do 5 Thursdays and 5 human books, and I've known Leslie now for about 5 years, 5 years, 6 years, something like that. I moved here 6 years ago, and then I started managing the Northern Manitoba Mining Academy, and Leslie was teaching first aid, and then she came on as a safety instructor, and we spent quite a few hours solving real world problems.
in safety.
In safety. But I did get to know a little bit about her story, and I found it very interesting. And you know, we never ever get from A to Z in a straight line. We kind of zigzag our way through life, and I think that's how you found yourself here in Flin Flon. So it gives me great pleasure. By the way, my name is Elizabeth Andres, and I am the library administrator here at the Flin Flon Public Library, in case you wonder who that woman is talking in there. And so anyways, Leslie, I'm happy to have you here, and I look forward to hearing everything you have to say. One of the things that makes this, it's obviously a little different than other years. Normally it would be like more one-on-one, and I could ask you questions. So I think that you agree with me. If someone has a question, just ask the question, because that's what makes it a conversation. And that's how we end up going not A, B, C, D, but we go kind of through, and we eventually end up where we need to be. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for the great turnout. I wasn't sure if I'd come here and be by myself.
Full house.
Telling my story to myself once again. So, for the first 5 or 6 minutes, I'll be out of breath because it'll take me that long to get my nerves back into my stomach, where they should be instead of up in my speaking voice, so just be kind of patient there. It does activate my sinuses, so excuse me if all of a sudden you see me using a piece of Kleenex, because that's just the way it is, and that's something I can't really put back in when I don't want it to happen. So, but I just want to say that this year is the year that I turned 60. So for me, it's kind of reflective to be asked to do this kind of thing, because as I turned 60, it's been a time of reflection for me to actually look over the decades to see how they kind of connected and how they came together, and how you end up in a place where you never, if you'd have told me when I was 15 that you're going to live your life in Flin Flon, Manitoba, I would have speak those words, right? I didn't really even see myself outside of the province of Saskatchewan, let alone, you know, coming outside and then coming up here and then, you know, living an entire different life. So it's been an interesting journey, and a couple of things that I've always relied on are when people would say things like, that person has no common sense. Where's the common sense in the world? To me, it always came back to, because I listened to a TED Talk one time, and the speaker talked about wisdom. And it's not about people having common sense, it's about them having wisdom. And wisdom isn't given to you, it's learned, it's taught, it's your experiences, right? And as you go through your life, you pick up these experiences, and they kind of guide you in the different tracks of life that you take on. So I really believe in that, and I know that looking around the room here tonight, that I see in every one of you those kinds of bits and pieces, because of some of the things you've done for the community, some of the conversations I've had with you, some of your living experiences, and I truly believe that's what we pass on to our children, and that's why it's important, whether we're teaching them, guiding them, raising them, is that it's not about, the one thing one day, my son came home with his truck, and it wasn't running right. And he says to his dad, my truck's not running. And Richard says, well, did you check the oil? And Aiden looks at him and goes, no. Well, then it goes, you didn't check the oil, it's your responsibility, don't you know what you have to do? And anyways, long story short, yes, it needed oil, and it needed a few other things, and yes, the conversation was, you know, a bit elevated, but I said, at one point I said, you know what, stop. I said to my husband, I said, did you ever read the owner's manual in your own truck? He goes, no. Who would do that? I go, well, so did you expect him to read his? Well, that's would be common sense that you would know these kinds of things. And I go, well, no, when we were growing up, we did our own oil changes. It's something that we saw our fathers do and our grandfathers do and our neighbor was doing, right? That is something, nowadays, everything's electronic, so we have to take it to a garage. You don't see that anymore, backyard mechanics and all that stuff. So there is no way of him, really an expectation on our part to assume that he would know that, unless we've actually physically taken him and done that job for him, and then had him exercise it back to us. So we have learning moments like that all the time. So those are the things that I have come to appreciate and have learned from and built on, and then from that becomes the piece of it that becomes resiliency, right? So that you can withstand or overcome obstacles as they kind of pop up in your life. Excuse me. So, by way of background, I was born in Regina, and I come from a fairly affluent background. My grandparents were in the hotel industry, and large farmers, and they had hotels and different things like that. But unfortunately for my father, he did not have a relationship with his father. So at the age of 50, he was thrown out of the house, and he was on his own. So I think by the time he was 16, he was already an electrician. He was already on his own working, as you could back in those days, right? You could be an electrician very young in life. And he met my mother, and my mother was young, 17. I think he was 18 at the time, maybe 17, she was 16. And of course, one thing leads to another, and they're going to expect me, so they got married. So in the next 3.5 years, they had 4 children. So I'm the oldest, my brother's the youngest. I'm born in August of 60, and he's born in June of 64. So my mother was very busy. But my mother also, when she was younger, had meningitis. And the meningitis was serious enough that it was a quarantine situation in Saskatchewan, and many people actually died. And for her, she ended up with some mental health difficulties. She ended up with suffering from depression. She had some delayed education capacity of learning and stuff, which of course we would have never known, right? You only find those out years later as circumstances happen. And my father, because he was never able to live in a surrounding of care and nurturing from a male figure, he never learned how to the capacity to be kind. So the relationship between my mother and father was very hard. So domestic violence, I don't remember ever a day in my life that my dad was not beating up on my mother. So it's a hard reality to look back on, but it is something that now I think it's important to talk to, because when I was 15 and I thought that the whole world had nothing to offer me, that I was alone, my mother and father were always fighting, it was hard. So we moved out of Regina and we moved to Broadview, and we bought the hotel from our grandparents. My brother lived downstairs with my parents. There was no room for my sisters, so I had one hotel room on one side, and my sisters had a hotel room on the other side. So again, there's no way for bonding between siblings. We just didn't want to be downstairs where the fighting was, so unfortunately that's where my brother got stuck. And the 3 of us were just kind of hiding upstairs, hoping that we could just, live apart from it. So in that kind of atmosphere, you learn to be independent very quickly. So nobody ever worried about whether or not we got up for school. Nobody worried about whether we were at school. If the teachers tried to, say, hey, maybe Leslie should come to school once in a while, they'd only write letters, right? So it was really easy to go to the mailbox and get the mail, open it up, and then rip it up and,
Go through the days.
And so when I was 15, and this is the part of the story that is reflected for me, is that what I would do when I was really depressed and life was really getting me down is I would just go for long walks, or I'd find a park, I'd find a swing, and I'd really just try and put it kind of together. Like, why am I in this spot? Is there really a reason for me to be here? Like, what am I going to contribute to this? I'm never going to get out of it. And then something just like popped in my head, and I thought, well, my best friend's father's an alcoholic. And my other best friend's father's an alcoholic. I was like, I'm not alone in this. I'm just alone in that we don't talk about it. And that was the first time we're finally gathered in that we're not alone. We just don't have any way of expressing it, especially back in the 60s and 70s. It just was, everybody was kind of on their own. Right? I mean, you went to school, you didn't talk about your problems. There was no social workers that would come in and check up on you, to see if things are all good. And the other thing is that when they think you live affluently, nobody really thinks that there's anything going on behind that closed door. And it's always a story of, well, it's not my business, right? That's their business. Like, I can't involve myself in that kind of business. So when I was about 15, and I was drinking. The one thing I never did get involved in was drugs. I knew that based on the addictions in my family, I needed to stay away from that road. But I did drink, and I did basically do everything I could not to go to school. So the teachers, they would come up to me, and I'm sure talking, wife can appreciate it, they come to me and they go, Leslie, what is your plan? And I go, I'm going to get married. And they go, well, that's not a plan. Sure it is. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have a nice house. I'm going to have a good husband, and I'm going to live happily ever after. And he goes, Leslie, that's not going to happen. I go, why not? I see people married everywhere. He goes, well, you need to have an education. You need to want to, have a goal. And I go, well, I think that's a pretty good goal. Why can't they just get married and have children? Sounds good to me. So they kind of just let me go. One day when I was coming into my math class, and the teacher stands up and goes, yay, let's have a standing ovation for Leslie. I go, the 50th class you've missed in algebra. Yay, let's celebrate. And I go, oh, okay, I'm going to be famous for something. But so long story short, that kind of led to, again, people not understanding, what's going on in your head and stuff, and you're just out and you're struggling to, build up the capacity to, figure out how these pieces are all going to fit together. And I met the man of my dreams. So we started dating probably around the time that I was 16 years of age, and he said, well, what are we going to do? I said, well, let's just get married. We should get married.
Working on your plan.
But anyways, our parents, so about the same time, my mother finally got the courage up to tell my dad that she couldn't live in that living arrangement anymore. So she did take my two sisters, and they did relocate to Weyburn, Saskatchewan. And I wasn't interested in going there, so I stayed home with my father. And my brother kind of went back and forth depending on what he was feeling at the time. But at that point, he was starting to become a little bit of a lost soul too. And anyways, my dad decided that on top of his alcoholism, because my mother decided to leave him, he should go to the doctor for his depression, and so they just piled on the antidepressants. So on top of dealing with his drinking, he now had to run a hotel, and he was, half the time, he was like, just either sleeping or raging mad. And so there I was trying to live within that capacity, finish what I could of school, and finally one day he and I just had a really big fight, and I went to my boyfriend at the time and I said, well, that's it for me, I can't live here anymore. And he said, okay, well, we'll move to Regina. I said, just like that? Yeah, he has a 75 Trans Am. So I went down. Oh, okay, I have to tell you the story. So, as bad as my father was, and I probably wasn't very kind to him either. But anyways, at one point, I wanted him to put a phone in my room upstairs, and he kept saying, "No, Leslie, there'll be no phone in your room." I go, "Yeah, but it's dangerous up there. There's all these people there. The railroad tracks are right there. Anybody could get off the train and come here." And he goes, "No, Leslie, there will be no telephone in your room." So I said, "Okay, whatever." So I knew he was going hunting. I knew he'd be gone for a week. So I called up the telephone company and I said, "I'd like a phone in my room, please." And to my surprise, he said, "Okay, when?" I said, "Well, sometime before this date, by Friday." And they go, "Yeah, no problem." So there I was waiting. Sure enough, telephone company showed up. I showed them where I wanted the phone. But it's an old building. They had to cut the window out to get the telephone line into the building. I was like, they literally cut. So I'm standing there in my room and I look out and here comes my dad in his big black Suburban. Oh my God! So my dad! Anyways, he pulls up in the back of the hotel. The guys are working on putting a telephone in my room and he gets out. Thank God he was sober and he goes, "Leslie, what the blah, 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 is going on here?" I said, "I'm getting a phone." We're trying the telephone number. Like, he doesn't know you're getting a phone. That's going to fix the hole. I don't know. They work very quickly for me. Anyways, so I had a phone in my room. So we had this big fight with my dad. I phoned up my boyfriend. I phoned up Jimmy. I said, "We have to go." So he says, "Okay, pack your bags. I'm coming for you." I said, "Great." We're right out of town on our 75 Trans Am. Little did I know that my dad actually had gone to his parents' place, and behind the scenes they're like talking back and forth, like, "This isn't going to happen. She's only 17. He's barely." Well, he had just come back from trying to get work in northern BC. So he's 5 years older than me. So he's 22 at the time. So when I get to his house to go off, there are all our parents sitting there looking at us, and they go, "You can't go. It's too late. They got my bag packed." So off we go to Regina, and again, you're young, you think you're old, and you think that there's life will be just easy. It doesn't matter if you don't have 5 cents to your name, right? It's like, who cares, right? You're in love, you've got a nice car, doesn't matter. So we get to Regina and we go to a friend's place. He's got a house that's like as big as that table. So we knock on the door and he opens it up and he goes, "What are you doing here?" "Well, we gotta have some place to live." And we come with our bags and stuff. And so where we were living in that particular street in Regina, Dudney, is right across the street from the RCMP Academy. And it was interesting because I said to Jimmy, I said, "What is all the noise coming from that place over there?" Because you could always hear the drums, you could hear people, and you could see these people running all the time out on the street. And finally one day we went and inspected it. It was the RCMP Academy, and I thought, "Oh, who knew? They lived in Regina." It's like, holy smokes, right? So, looking back on it, it's almost like it was meant to be, right? I believe in karma. I believe that there are things out there that happen that lead you in certain directions. And anyways, Regina didn't really work out that well. We were poor and our place didn't even have a fridge. So we went and bought beer. We had to buy a bag of ice, and put the plug in, and then we'd put the beer in, and then the ice, and then we'd run cold water over it, hoping that the ice would stay colder longer, because we know that doesn't work, right? It just melted the ice and all the things. So But what did come out of that is that Jimmy got a job with the Saskatchewan Wheat Pool, and he got a job in Whitewood, Saskatchewan, which is only 7 miles east of where we come from. So we packed up our bags and we went back, and I moved home. I moved back to my dad, and he moved in with his parents, and nobody said anything, right? You just kind of go back to living the way you were living, and everything kind of. But we did move into. Finally got a house in Whitewood. It was this old house, and we only had iron beds, and they clanged really loud, and it was like I had to pull my laundry on a sleigh down the street. Barefoot in the February quarters. Our Trans Am didn't work really well in the winter, so it was always stuck, so I was always shoveling to try to get out. It was so cold in the house that when you went to go take a bath, sometimes there'd be icicles on your feet when you were trying to step in on those things. But it was only, I think, $80 a month, but I think it was like $400 to heat it. But I was determined that my goal was to be Susie Homemaker, so this is my opportunity. I got my house, I got my man, okay?
Got your Trans Am.
I can do laundry. So one thing in the hotel we did have is we had exceptional cooks, so we learned a lot from those ladies. And I still, to this day, cook from where I learned watching them do what they do. But our one cook, she made these wonderful cinnamon buns. They were this big and this thick. They were just to die for. And so I said, I went there and I said, Hilda, I said, can you tell me how to make these cinnamon buns? Because I'm going to make them for Jimmy, right, for lunch. And she goes, yeah, no problem. So she kind of lays it out for me. This is the recipe, and you have to do this and raise it, and then you roll it out, and then you're going to put this butter and cinnamon on, and then you roll it up, and then you cut it up, and then you pop it in the oven. You'll have cinnamon buns, right? In my Trans Am. Down the highway I go, 14 miles. And I buy all the ingredients, and I put it all together, and it rises, and I plug that dough on the table, and I roll, and I roll, and I roll, and I roll. Then I get the butter, and I lightly dump the butter on it, put a little brown sugar on there, put some cinnamon on it, and I roll, and I roll, and I roll. And I think, oh, well, it's about that thick, so I cut it. And I thought, shit, you get like 60 cinnamon buns out of one roll. This is awesome. Put it on a pan. Jimmy comes home from work, and I go, hey, we're going to have fresh cinnamon buns tomorrow. And I peek under the tea towel. Nothing's happening. So I think, oh, it must happen when you put it in the oven. That's when they get big and fluffy. So I throw it in the oven. So anyways, I don't know, when I was growing up, we had these cookies called cinnamon Danish cookies. They were hard like this, clunk, clunk, clunk. You had to have a cup of tea. You could throw one of those across the room and break a window. There were about 60 of these started. So yeah, at that point in time, Leslie was not going to be a baker. She had lots to learn from that. So, anyways, I was successful, and I got a little job working at the co-op. So life was good. Our parents weren't really happy that we were 17 and 22 living on our own. Right? It was kind of unheard of in those days to have common law relationships, but everybody kind of lived with it. It wasn't going to change, so that's the way. And so we went away to kind of a family gathering, and we were on our way home from this family gathering, and he wasn't feeling very good, and he said, he says, I'm in a lot of pain. And so by the time it was only about a 2-hour drive home, by the time we got home, he was bedridden. And he wasn't really one for going to doctors, so I finally convinced him he couldn't go to work, so he went to the doctor. We were sitting in the waiting room, and when he came out, he said, it's not good, Leslie. The doctor says it's not good. I said, well, what do you mean it's not good? He goes, well, I have a tumor. He figures I have a tumor. He's going to try and get me fast-tracked to Regina to a surgeon. So he ended up having a tumor in one of his testicles. And back in the 80s, although testicle cancer is as common in men as breast cancer and as women, it wasn't a cancer that was really widely talked about simply because of the stigma. You know, that whole, you know, women can talk about women things sometimes, and very rarely did we talk about them even in the 60s and 70s, but we certainly didn't talk about, you know, male cancers and stuff. So the system worked, so that would have been in June, and he was in surgery by the end of June, and we went into Regina, and so it's the strangest thing, because around me is people are in denial, right? So this, they didn't want to listen that what was happening in Regina is going to be a really serious thing, right? They just thought, oh, we're going to go in and get this lump out and then everything will go back to normal. So was in Regina alone with him, waiting for him to come out of surgery. And I was sitting there beside his bed, and you know, it's a shared room, and all sorts of stuff going on all around us. And the doctor came, and he wanted me to step outside, so I went with him. And he said to me, he says, "Your husband's a very sick man." I said, "Well, I don't know what you mean." He says, "He's a very sick man." He said, "We were able to remove the tumor, but it's already masticed. It looks like above the belly button. So when cancer is masticed, this type of cancer masticing above the belly button, the life expectancy is quite short. And we have to prevent it from going into the lungs, because once it hits the lungs, then there's life expectancy is pretty close to me." So I was like, oh my Lord, I didn't even know how to accept that information, right? So I said, "Well, where is he now?" And he said, "Well, he's in recovery, so he doesn't know the information yet, so we're going to bring him back. Is there anybody else here with you?" I don't know, nobody here with me. So I got on the phone, and I phoned his father, and he answered the phone, and I said, "Ed," I said, "I don't know what to tell you." I said, "The doctors just told me that Jimmy's a really sick man, and he might die." And Jimmy's father wasn't a very talkative man, and so he just hung up the phone. So I was sitting in this phone booth in a hospital. And so back to the room, and I sat beside the bed, and you know, waiting for him to come back, and he comes back, he's groggy, and he's, you know, obviously he's sore and from the surgery, and I said they removed the tumor. I said, but they say that you have cancer, and the prognosis doesn't look like it's very good. And he just looked at me, he says, "No," he says, that can't be. It's just a little lump." I said, "Oh, that's what the dog." Anyways, at that time, one of his cousins show up, and so this cousin says, he says, you know, quick hi to Jimmy, and he says, "Can I talk to you out in the hallway?" And I go, "Sure." So I'm thinking, oh great, they rallied some family to come and help me through this. I go out in the hallway, and he looks at me, he goes, "What do you think you're doing?" I go, "Right now I'm trying to explain to Jimmy that he has cancer before the doctors come in here, because the doctors want me to tell him." And he says to me, he says, "Well, don't you think you're jumping the gun here a little bit? Like, don't you think that scaring the family like that? You have everybody upset, Leslie." I go, "This is my fault." I said, "Really? This is my fault?" I said, I don't know what to say to you. I said, "This is what the doctors have told me. This is what I know. As soon as he gets out of hospital, we have to go straight to the cancer clinic, and they're going to set him up on cancer treatment." And he said, "You know what? You don't know nothing. You shouldn't speak until you know for sure what's going on. And the family really thinks this is a really stinky thing that you've done to them." I said, "Okay." So, and I just can remember thinking to myself, okay, something's happened to my love story here. It's like supposed to be this beautiful relationship, me making bad cinnamon buns in the kitchen, and now I'm going to have to deal with possibly, losing him. And so when we went to the cancer clinic, so we lived about an hour and 20 minutes from Regina. So he had to have 5 weeks, 5 weeks every day radiation. Then he had to have 6 months in hospital for a week of chemotherapy. And then, depending on how that worked, then we would have to come once a week for follow-up chemotherapy to try and reduce the cancer that had spread into his lungs. They wanted to get the cancer out of his lungs because that was going to be the most aggressive cancer they had. So he obviously couldn't go to work, so he gave up my job. We got another house back home in Broadview, hoping that there would be some supports for us there. And I got a job where I could work. So I worked from 9 in the morning till noon, and then I got off from noon to 4. So I could either drive him to his appointment, or I could go to Regina and sit with him for a couple hours, and then I would come back. And then I would work from 4 till the restaurant closed, because we also didn't have any money, and there was no such thing as disability insurance. And of course, we didn't have any savings whatsoever. And yeah, so that became our regiment. And we were hopeful. We said to the doctors, we said, what's the prognosis? And they said, well, we're hoping if you follow this and do this, we can stop the cancer. So that was, we started that in June. Basically, they said to me, you're not married to him, so you can't have any part of his treatment regimens. So I got a little ahead of myself. So they said, in order for you to have anything to do with him, you have to be married to him. So we were going to get married in November. We had to quickly get married. We had a small wedding on the 12th of July so that the hospitals would allow me into the hospital. The doctors would please share what was going on with his treatments and so on. So again, the parents were really unhappy that they didn't really, at that point, his parents had hoped that I would just step aside and he would just stay at home and then they could take over. But I was a bit stubborn at that point. This was still my fairy tale, and I was going to live it out to see. I still had a lot of hope at that point that we could get back to where we were supposed to be. Unfortunately, that was in June, got married in July, and in the beginning part of April, the pain escalated. And I finally called up the doctors. I said, I don't know what to do anymore. The morphine's not doing anything. The pain is like he can't eat. He's lost so much weight. So back into Regina we go. We see a surgeon, and I really, this is where the part of me that when I deal with people, friends and acquaintances that are going through cancer with their family, this is the point where sometimes I have to check myself what I say, because I just have this feeling at that point in our journey with cancer, they should have been more honest with us, because what they said was, the surgeon came in and said, we see something inside, but we think we can remove it. So they rush him into surgery, and they cut him from just below the collarbone right to the crotch. It's like he was 80 pounds, right? And again, I'm sitting in the bed in this room by myself waiting for them to come back, and the doctor called me out of the room again, and he goes, the tumor was too big, Leslie. We couldn't get it. He said, but what we were able to do, because it's encased in all of these veins and arteries, but what we did is we clipped it. So we sewed it back up, and we're gonna send you for more radiation therapy. And not knowing any better, and again going back to how I feel about some lengths of treatments, and what sometimes you end up feeling like you're a bit of a guinea pig. So they put him through a series of cobalt treatments at that point. So the radiation was pinpointed at his abdomen. So the rule was he couldn't bath no water on it because it would cause blistering. So there he was, uncomfortable, and you can't wash, you can't do nothing. And we still had to drive back and forth every day to go and do these cold wall treatments. And, you know, the outcome was, in April, the 14th, he passed away. You know, so basically 8 months, right, our lives together came to an end. I was like devastated. You know, suicide. I mean, people started hiding. People would sneak in my house and started taking pills out of my cupboard. Like, I just was a mess. I wouldn't. I didn't feel like getting dressed. I wouldn't get dressed. If I went to work, I worked in a bar. I liked it because I could just sit there and drink with everybody in the bar. So it was like, you know, I wasn't even 20 years old yet when he died, and I, you know, I didn't have an education. Now I was like, oh, shit, you know, I didn't have a grade 12 education. I'm alone. My getting married story's out the window. And what am I going to do? Well, I went to work. I'm working in the hotel, and people around me, like some people, like they were very concerned, and I appreciate them to this day, and they're still in my lives to this day. Like I said, they would hide. They'd come in my cupboards. If they saw any pills in them, they would hide. They would throw them away. They would say, "Leslie, we know what you're going to do. You can't do that." I said, you know, it's my life. If I decide that I don't want to be here, then that's my choice, and you people aren't going to stop me from doing that. I said, right now I'm good. I'm making my way, but you need to just kind of like back off. So I bought myself a little house. I started fixing it up, and one day, because when you live in a little town, you see the police a lot. So we had our own detachment right in Broadview. So we saw there was 20 some of them. So we still have them locked. So I mean, everywhere we went, they were after us. We got to know them over the years. They got to know me quite well. And I had heard, right? So I had heard in 1974 that they let women into the police, right? And so I went down to the detachment and I said, what would it take for me to join the RCMP? And they said, well, you have to have a GED or a grade 12, you have to be this, you have to be this height. And I said, oh, I don't have a GED and I don't have a grade 12. But I need to get this done because when people ask me what I'm going to do with my life, I'm just going to tell them to join the RCMP. Now, I know they'll never take me, but at least I'll have something I can tell them. Okay? So I look up what it takes to get a GED, and they, in Saskatchewan at that time, you just had to go into Regina in the evening. It was from 5 till 8, and you wrote 5 tests, and then if you passed them all, they'd give you grade 12. Well, that sounds easy enough. So I get in my Trans Am, drive into Regina, I go up, and there's just me and just a whole slew of people like me, right? And so we go in, we write the first test. It's the math test. And we get a bit of a break. We come out, I'm standing by this guy, and he's a trucker, and he says to me, he says, what'd you get for that apple question? I go, you mean the one about the barrels? Yeah. Wasn't that a tough one? I go, like if you had 50 apples and you sold 25, how many apples do you have left? Yeah, that was a real brain twister. I didn't have enough room to put 50 apples on the table. Start crossing them off of it. I'm going, ooh, okay. This is going to be interesting. We've got science, history, and I forget about it. Anyway, so I wrote those tests, and I get in my car, I'm all pleased, right? A week later, I get a thing in the mail. You're now you're grade 12. I said, well, everybody should do that with grade 12. All the time it would save people. So down I went, got the application, filled it all out, handed it off, and the next time somebody said to me, so Leslie, what are you going to do with your life? I said, I'm going to join the university. They went, yeah. But no, seriously, they take women now. And I did that application in. And about a week or so goes by, or not very much time anyways, and I get this phone call, and I said, Leslie Brown. I said, yeah, this is the RCMP. And I went, yeah. We'd like you to, yeah, so first I was like, what did I do wrong? They said, we want you to come in for an interview. I went, are you serious? And they go, we wouldn't phone you unless we were serious. I said, well, where's this interview going to be? He said, well, we'll have it right there in Broadview. We'll come out and see you. I said, when do you want to see me? Is tomorrow okay? I said, okay. So these neighbors that I had who kind of like took me under their wing, I go dashing from my house to their house, and I said, Connie, I said, the RCMP wanted to interview me. She goes, well, that's good. I said, no, I'm not doing that. I want to be the best thing in the world. I want to be a cop. I said, no, that wouldn't be for me. She goes, Leslie, what do you have to lose? Just go and do the interview. Like, really, it's like, what are you going to do this afternoon? Well, I didn't have any real big plans. Okay, we'll just go, or tomorrow. So I go and I do this interview, and like, I'm pretty honest with them because I'm thinking, yeah, like, might as well. And so I said to them, I said, you know, like, my dad's already had like 20 impaired driving charges. And they had color-coded licenses back then. I think they ran out of colors for him. Anyways, I looked at him, I said, well, why would you be interested in me? I said, I don't really have the background. And they just looked at me and said, we don't judge people by their families. We just judge people for who they are. And I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. So anyways, I went through the interview, and anyways, walked out of there, and I said, well, that'll be the end of that. Because I did, when I was 15, have one episode of suicide, and I was pretty honest with them about that, and I said, yeah, because it's a question that they ask people, if you ever attempted suicide, and so I thought, well, there's no point in polygraphing me or something, so I did disclose all of those things, and my family, whatever, so off I go, and again, it was like maybe a week, and the phone rings again, and it's oh, it's RCMP. They go, yeah. Well, we'd like you to come in for your physical fitness test. I go, for what? To join the RCMP. I said, are we still on that? They said, yeah. So I dash over to the neighbor again. I go, Connie, they want me to come in for a physical fitness test. And she goes, well, go. I go, no. I said, I'm not cop material. And she goes, what have you got to lose, Leslie? Well, I got to drive to Regina this time. You're not coming out to see me. So she says, come on, Leslie. It's not going to cost you nothing. So I said, okay, whatever. So into Regina I go. And it was the strangest thing. I had to do like 30 sit-ups in a minute and 12 push-ups or something. It was like, even I could do this test, right? And I said, that's it? They go, yeah. I said, well, what's now? He goes, well, just go home, wait for us. I said, okay, so I drive back home. And a week later again, the phone rings. Hello, Leslie, this is RCMP. I said, yeah, and now what? Well, now we want to check you out physically. I said, physically, what do I have to do? He goes, well, now you're going to come into Regina, and we're going to make sure you have good teeth. We're going to make sure that you have a good, you know, all of the stuff that you need to have.
Why teeth? Why teeth?
Because they don't want to pay for people's bad teeth. Okay? It's a big thing, right? They want to make sure that when you join, they wouldn't be like repairing them, right? So so you have to go. I had to go. I forget how many appointments I went to, but I ended up having to go actually to Regina, to depot for the very first time in my life. I had gone on the grounds, right? So I pull up in my Trans Am, and I get out, and it says, it's huge, right? And there's all these people. Right? And I don't have a clue where I'm going. I got to see the RCMP doctor. So anyways, I'm going, excuse me, not knowing that these people are not allowed to break ranks. They can't stop, and you know. Anyways, finally this one troop stops, or one guy breaks the right marker, breaks ranks, come running over and said, like, can we help you? I said, yeah, I'm supposed to have some sort of doctor's appointment here today. I said, could you help me, point me in the right direction, how I find that? Anyways, he asked me. I find out years later that the RCMP now has, like there's a whole string of lawsuits because this is one of the, that's the doctor that everybody, like he lured all these women candidates in and performed all of these tests that weren't necessarily supposed to be performed on. But when I went in there and he started asking me to take my shirt off, I went, why? He goes, he said, what's under my shirt that you're going to have to see that would make me a member of the RCMP? My boobs aren't going to be big enough, I don't know. So anyways, he just kind of backed off. For me, he was a bit creepy, but he only took my vitals and he tapped my knee, asked me to take my shirt off, and I said no, and then that was the end of it. But I've since learned through some of these lawsuits that he did perform some really tactless things on them, so that, I mean, that part of it was unfortunate, but I'm very thankful that it wasn't part of my training. So, finished all that, went back home again, and they, again, you know, I hear from the phone rings and they go, okay, you did it. I said, wow. We're going to accept you in the RCMP. I said, are you serious? You're going to be getting a letter in the next couple of weeks, and they're going to give you a date when you can come into Regina and you can start doing your training, and started telling me all the things, and hung up the phone, and way I go over to class. Yeah, no, this has gone too far. I said, I'm going to have to phone them and tell them that, no, I'm not, this is, she goes, Leslie, what are you going to do? They're gonna pay you to go and be trained. They're gonna give you a place to live. They're gonna feed you. You got nothing to lose. It's 6 months of your life. Go do it. What are you doing now? You're working in a bar. I gotta live in a dorm with 20 other women or 23 other women. I said, I can't see myself doing that. She goes, go, just go. So I sucked it up. I got in my car and away I went. And it was the hardest 6 months of my entire life, living with 23 other women in a big room. Like it's a training like no other. I've not a regret in my whole life for doing it, but it was probably one of the hardest things I ever did. It's just one big room, all 24 of you showering in it. It's just a bunch of, and you're just in this big building, and at night you never know if the men are going to come raid your dorm, and there could be a parade of bare asses running through your doors. Or, you know, it was just, you know, you're kind of within a bubble of your own in this this particular training. And as we got near the end of it, and we got a choice of where to go. Of course, I'm not a big one for change, so I really didn't want to leave Saskatchewan, but it really was a rule that you couldn't. So my two choices were Saskatchewan, or Manitoba. So the writing was pretty much on the wall that I was going to come here to Manitoba. So my first posting was to Beausejour, Manitoba, where I got my first taste of what it's like to be a woman in a man's world. The career in the RCMP is it's very like what you get back from people is like no other, right? You're just so fulfilled when you're able to be at a car accident, and you know you're the one that sits with people until the ambulance get there. All those things are just gratifying to be able to be a part of. But the people themselves were really hard, and it's I was one of the first 400 to get hired and go through training, and there was no real love for the fact that we were coming into these detachments. But in my first detachment, and this is again. You guys will hear a lot about it and I can speak about it because there's so many lawsuits out about it now and so on and so forth. But I was, Beausejour was a farming community that only had farmers and kids, because everybody in the area were obviously farmers, but their kids could drive to university because we were only like 40 minutes from the city. So we had, the crime there was like minimal, kids drinking and breaking enters, because we would have a lot of gangs of people that would come out of the city and rob people in the rural area that were in the city working. So they would just come out in masses, and they would literally clean out whole neighborhoods of rural communities, and then they would go back into the city and then fence all that. So that's what we did. We basically chased young kids drinking and tried to solve unsolvable break-and-enters. So the detachment I was in was filled with members that had a lot of service, and they enjoyed the lifestyle of not really having to work too hard. But so they drank a lot, and so we had they were always forever out. After work they were drinking. Sometimes at work they were drinking. But for me it was like, holy smokes! Like, this isn't what I was expecting, right? You put them on a kind of a pedestal. You join them, and then now here you are one of them, and you're seeing things that, like, ethically, morally, and unlawfully, you're seeing things that just don't kind of match up. At any rate, when I was in Beausejour, it was the first time that I had to arrest another member for impaired driving. Needless to say that it didn't go over very well. It didn't go over very well within the detachment. I had a very supportive boss at the time. I wasn't really left with any choice. I was working alone, and the situation was, it couldn't be looked elsewhere. So the solution for the RCMP at the time was, because I had done this, I had to be transferred, right? So they said, you'll have to move. I said, well, what did I do wrong? And they go, well, it's just going to be easier for everybody, Leslie, if you go, and then we'll just resolve this. So the members that were involved, there's 5 of them in total in the incident. They had to go to dry out for 2 weeks, and then they could go back to work. And Leslie had to pick up, go to Roblin, tail between her legs, report at a detachment that only had 3 or 4 people, knowing that all the gossips and all the rumors were, following her. And anyways, I thought, okay, this is a new start. I can do it. Still have my Trans Am. Drove up into the, went in, smiling, saying, I know that there's some stuff that happened, but I wouldn't have done what I had to do unless it was the thing that was to do. We cannot be 2 different things in the RCMP. We can't tell the general public they can't drink and drive, and then turn around and drive and drink ourselves. So I said, that's who I am. That's not going to change. And so I said to my boss, I said, that's who I am. That's my moral compass. Don't ask me to change it. It's not going to fire me. So now I'm working. So my first attachment had a really awesome boss. He was very supportive. My second boss was a misogynist pig. Not in a way that he, would do anything that was touchy or there was nothing sexual in his. But he was just one of these people that believed that women had no place in the RCMP, and he would openly. I would find out his word for me was either the C word, that CUNT I work with, or that BITCH that has to come to work every day that I have to tolerate. And he would openly go to coffee, and he had no problem talking. But I talked to the other members and worked hard and did my job. And one night I was working, and no, I was in Yorkton. So there's a Roblin, I was in Yorkton, I had family there, and I ran into these 2 guys that worked at a Dolphin. And we were just got chatting or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. I knew them, I knew their wives or whatever. And so that night I was working, and I was pulled up beside the bar doing some checks. Out they come. Two guys, they're rolling in the bar drinking. Why? And so long story short, I ended up in a high-speed chase with them. They actually tried to kill me. They come out of the bar. So again, I'm not going to go into a whole pile of details with it, but here I was thinking to myself, like, how does this happen? Like, how does one person really end up in two situations back to back? They're already still trying to deal with the first one, and here I am, you know, caught into this again. So, and I was, but you know, we were out of town. It was just the three of us. They had already tried to run me over, but you know what? I just said to myself, this is going to happen my way, and they're not going to win. It's going to cost me my mental health. I know it's going to cost in the long run, but these guys are not winning this war. My partner, who was working, he finally showed up because he also knew these people, and he didn't want to get involved in it. And we finally got the situation back to the detachment, and we ended up having to call in, you know, backup from other detachment commanders to come in because they were throwing telephones at me, and oh, you know, it was. When I look back on it today, and I think about those things, and I think about you know who I become and how I got there. Is like, wow, right? So. It was me that initiated, so after that was all said and done, I actually went into Winnipeg and said, that's it. I've given you 5 of the best years of my life. I can't do this anymore. This is, you don't want women in your organization? I get it. You know what? I got to get out. So I said, give me my discharge papers. I'm out. Anyways, I was sitting at my desk working, and it was a Sunday, and the phone rang, and so in the hierarchy in the RCMP is the person that's in charge of the province would be an assistant commissioner. So the phone rings and says, this is Assistant Commissioner Simmons, and I said, is this a joke? I said, it's Sunday. Why would the Assistant Commissioner of the division be calling me, Leslie Beck, at my desk? Right? He said, is this a joke? He goes, no, I'm serious, Leslie. This is the commanding officer for the division. I had a conversation with our staffing officers, and I understand that you're going to leave us. And I said, sir, I said, all due respect. I said, after the second incident, I said, I can't do it anymore. I have to go. And he said, what would we have to do as people to convince you to stay? I said, I said, I don't know. I said, because I'm a broken, I said, I'm a really broken person in the state and town, right? Because there's nobody to talk to, right? Like nobody's, you know, riding up on your horse to tell you that these 2 most popular members of the division that you just arrested for impaired driving, right? And like when the trial, like they even pled not guilty. So when the trial came, I had to go to court in Rockland in front of everybody in Rockland. It was me, and they came to court with 6 other members, and they sat like pigeons along the side while I testified about what they did that night on the highway. So there was a really hard time to step back from that. Anyways, he said, no, you tell me what it is going to take to keep you here. We want you to stay. So I said, you know, when I was asking to come to Manitoba, I said, my background is in southern Saskatchewan. I'm born and raised around farming, indigenous, like, I asked to go to a community like that. I said I would be more than willing to go up north, but you won't let women go up north because you say that women can't go into the remote communities because wives don't allow female members to be in the living quarters in these detachments. I said, so you make us go to these attachments we're not even asking for, where it's not even, you know, capitalizing on, you know, some of our strengths that we can bring to the table. I said, so you want to keep me, you have to send me up north. I want to go up north. I want to go work with people that appreciate what I can do for their communities, my skill set that I have. And he said, done. He said, somebody will contact you Monday. So when the phone call came in, I really wanted Thompson or the Paw. And when they called me, they said, what do you think of Flin Flon? I go, well, it's not one of the, well, it wasn't one of the ones on my list. He says, well, would you consider it? I said, I'm thinking that you're sending me to Flin Flon. He said, well, it's the best we can do right now. Would you go there? So I said, you know what? Okay, one more chance. I got 5 years in. I said, I'll go up to Flin Flon. And, you know, when I came over the hill, it was like, I don't know.
In your Trans Am?
I still had my Trans Am. I was like,
What color was it, Leslie?
white. You know, I cannot, my first impressions were, yeah, I don't think so. I don't know why. It was like, you know, the rocks and, you know, I was thinking mining, it'd be transient people, you know. I just wanted something more, you know, where, you know, people knew each other, you know, like where everybody knows your name, right? Little did I know that you're never going to find a community more stuck together than the community of Flin Flon. Like, I like that was the first perception that I was, you know, that I was corrected on very, very quickly. You know, I got to this detachment. Everybody that was here was somebody that I was in training with. We all had about 5 years service, and it was like, it was a big turn over for me. I finally got to just be who I was. It was fun. It was great to come to work. We were very, very busy, and the community was just, and still is, just one of the most wonderful places to work. And I'm telling you, it's like when you're talking with somebody and you say to yourself, like you'll be dealing with one family set and you say, oh yeah, no, that's my cousin. Oh no, yeah, no, that's my uncle. No, that's. I said to myself, you know what? You can't talk about anybody in Flin Flon because you're likely talking about their family. But then I also found out that the people that are the ones that you know actually immigrated here, like they have strong roots back in Roblin. So that's how, again, I'd be walking down the street and I would hear my name being called, and it would be these people that I had met from St. Clair and Boggy Creek, and it's always been like that for me. It's like these you get your life from the contacts you have with the people that are around you. And you learn the wisdoms that you take from that, and the resiliencies are what are the greatest things that when you're dealing with somebody who's lost a family member or is dealing with suicide, that when you can dig deep within your own self and find that empathy. Because what I learned through my life is that you can't feel sorry for people. Nobody wants you to be sorry for them. No, you can't change you can't change what happened to me. So I don't want you to be sorry for me. But there's some empathy in that when you are struggling to get through a day, or you're feeling down, or your temper flares. There's pieces of that where you have to say, you know, you're having a bad day, Leslie or Angie or whoever you're talking to, you want to talk about it, right? And that's the whole thing now that I'm learning about mental health, is that we're taking it from a place of the 60s and 70s, and we're bringing it to a place where we can have open conversations like this, where I can tell you about my life, and we can understand why we need a bigger degree of open communication within our workforces where people can have a bad day. And it is okay to say to somebody, you know, you want to talk about it? Can I help you to find somebody to talk about it? Can you, you know, as opposed to shutting it all in and being that person when you're 15 and thinking that you're all alone. I belong to a Facebook group right now, Esprit de Corps it's called, and it's just a group of retired RCMP members, many of them that are struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder, many of them that are lost their families because of it, and that's all we do is we just simply, people can post in there, and then people just use their skill sets to come in and help them to get to where they need to be, where they can be safe, so that we can guard them. But every day on that website, somebody commits suicide. It's so tragic. It's like, and it's not just in that group, it's in many groups. But the other day, because I told you a lot today that I probably wouldn't have told a whole lot of people, but I'm 60 now and I feel that I can put that all out there. But there was a person that, what she posted on the site was, I asked my spouse to do a certain thing, I can't remember what it was, and when I came home, it wasn't anything the way I wanted it done, and I'm so angry, and I just don't know what to do, I just want to like yell at him, right? And so, like, I would never do that until I saw it actually put down on paper when she did this. And so the group started feeding information back to her, and this one person said to her, you know what, I think what you should do is just go back to him and say, that was a really great effort, but I'm just trying to figure out how this piece is going to actually work the way I want it to do this particular thing. And the husband actually looked at it and said, oh, yeah, no, because I left it like that so that when you put it on the floor, you had some artistic room to grow with it, and then once you had it figured out, then I would finish it the way you wanted it. And so she said, my first reaction was going to be to pick this fight, and after talking it out with a bunch of people and taking the piece of information she felt fit, it worked for her. And I commented in there back to her and said, you know what, I think that was so brave that you actually could put that out, because to me that would be a fault, right? That would be asking other people's help for a conversation to stop a domestic violence thing, right? Would be like going back to when you're a kid, right? And you're in your bubble and you just don't ever talk about those kinds of things. So I just feel that I think as people, we're going to get better at this whole, and COVID is kind of leaning us to be better people, to listen, better neighbors. We're learning how to, get back to the realities of, you only need 6 or 7 people within your life. That, you don't have to have the bars, you don't have to have the big socials. We can learn to, have, so for me, resiliency is what you develop from your life, and it allows you to continue to build on problem solving, right? And some people don't get that. They don't get that from, I think today too, we don't allow our children to fall, to have to problem solve that. And I'm probably the biggest enabler there is, right? Like, I don't want to see them hurt, right? Whereas my parents, like, when I was 8, my mother would give me a nickel, and I would get on the bus by myself and go downtown to Regina. Raise your hand if you would do that with your children right now today. When I was 13, we could get on the bus because it was free, because the bus stopped at our hotel, and I could go on the bus to Regina for the day shopping. Yeah. Who gets to know what's their kids on the bus to go shopping?
When I was 16 years old, I worked at a truck stop outside of 5 miles outside of Saskatchewan. And I worked the 11 o'clock to 7 o'clock in the morning. Me and a short order cook, 16 years old, the only girl, in a truck stop with all those truckers.
Yeah.
Who would do that now?
Right? Now it's like you see little, you know, you're just like, oh wow, it's like, but I mean, I'm not saying that that was a good thing, but our children haven't, you know, we have to find a different way to build those resiliency pieces to them. We have to give them their wisdom through other avenues so that they are strong people. So when they, you know, I like something like with your children, you know, just having to be outside the community playing hockey, having to build relationships on the fly, right? It builds capacity for change. And sometimes change is the hardest thing, because if you haven't ever done it, you know, I know people here in town, they've only lived here. If all of a sudden, it's not the fact that the company might close, it's the fact that things are going to change. And that's scary. Where am I going to live? Where am I going to work? I've only ever known this. I don't know how to, whereas if you ran into somebody they're on their 8th job working here, the fact that the mine might close is water off a duck's back. Oh, well, I'll just go and get a job somewhere else, right? So little things, you know, in the world today, being a teacher, being a healthcare worker, all those jobs are extremely hard. Our world is changing, and whether it's not, some people, you know, they'll make comments that kids today. But I can tell you this from experience. When I first moved here in 1986, I didn't think I could meet worse children than there were in Flin Flon, because they were like 4 o'clock in the morning, bucket 3/4 night outside the Flin Flon Hotel. Oh my God! I said, what will become of these children? What will become of them?
Are they sitting in this room tonight?
They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're, you know, it's amazing now that I've been able to almost see 3 generations of people. Like, I wrote off 2/3. And I'd be wagging my finger at them. You'll become nothing, you know. What are you going to do with your life? That's almost like my teacher's talking to me. But I'm sure Tom can attest to that, right? It's probably just like, but, I mean, that's me. That's how I ended up where I am today.
Leslie, when did you stop being an RCMP officer?
2007. When I got to my 25, because one of my goals was, when I finally got in, my neighbor convinced me to do it in 5-year increments. So, you know, she said the RCMPs can't be any different than a trade. So you're going to need 5 years to really, you know, learn your trade, know how to do it. So give it 5 years. So I agreed. So I hit 5, and I said, oh, I'll do 10, and I'll do 15. But when I got to 25, my children were starting to be in that age group where it was hard for them to have, not just, like, it's one thing to have your dad a cop, but it's another thing that your mother's a cop, because it adds another layer into it, right? Because my kids would come home and say, I'm going to sleep over at so-and-so's. No, you're not.
I know what happened to that
And so they we don't get to do anything. That's right.
Look how successful they are.
They got pretty cute. Another few stories. My son come in the house. He was really excited. He goes, "Oh, Mom, the police are looking for a lost little girl. Can I help? Can I help?" And I go, "I'm sure that the police don't really want you." No, they said, they stopped us and said, "Have you seen this little girl? Have you seen this little girl?" And I said, which policeman were you talking to? You
he's not very tall. And I go, no, I don't. No, he's got dark hair. Yeah, I know, so I was like, he's got a really lot of white teeth. He didn't want to say the black guy. Because in our house, we didn't talk that way, right? We had rules, right? The guy with all those white teeth. I'm sure Dale can find the little lost girl all by himself. That's it. Or I got a phone call from the school, and they said that was when we had the incident with the guy that held the lady hostage on Creekside and had the bombs and stuff, and so they had all the bomb people were in and everything, right? My phone rings and goes, Leslie, do you think you can come and get your son? Where would he be? Well, him and his friends are over on the other side of the creek, on the hill, trying to get a peek at their guys. Great. Right? But our kids, then by that time they were into the gaming, right? And all the guns and everything, like that would have been so exciting, right? And so down the street I went, over the bridge I went, and how'd you know I was here? Yeah. How did I ever know where, right? So, yeah, so when I hit my 25, it was time to give them their space that they needed to be kids in town so that they could enjoy their friends and not have to worry about, even though I still knew everything, they didn't need to know. But, so, any other questions about my great life?
You're a good speaker.
Yeah, it was very good. Leslie, I heard your story sort of before. I don't think I heard the story so much with the Trans Am parking center like that. But I think you should come back next year and tell us, what happened then. Like I feel like I went on a little portion of what happened. You could come back next year.
Yeah,
and then
you're not finished
continue.
yet.
Tell us about that 20 years here. I know there's lots of things you can't tell
The
us.
second husband.
What about
The second life.
Mention the kids, but not Richard.
I love him.
But anyways, I really enjoyed your story, and I think in your own way, you bring it around, you start talking about how people say the lack of common sense, but you totally brought it around full circle, because talking about things that we don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Famous saying now, but it's true. You don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah, and I don't like people to, pocket people into, like I do believe that there's systemic racism in our country, and I believe that people who say there's not are part of that thing. And I learned that again through, life of seeing that you don't know how people live. You can't make those assumptions of how they are, like where their life has been to get them to where they are. So you have to be, I think the strongest thing for me is one day in Beausejour, I was sitting beside a homeless man on the sidewalk. We didn't have very many of them, there was like 2. And so I was sitting down and having a chat with him, and I got up and I was walking down the street, and this store owner comes up and she goes, "Why would you ever sit beside him?" And I said, "Because that is my job. My job is to make sure that he's safe. My job is to make sure he's not hungry. My job is to make sure that," but as a peace officer, and I think sometimes we lose that, it's to keep the peace, and there's different ways of doing that, and it becomes everybody's responsibility to look after the guy that's laying on the bench. When I taught first aid, this was my biggest message to people. I don't expect you to go and do CPR on some guy that you don't know that's laying on the sidewalk, but I do expect you to call 911. I see too often where it's easy to step over that person, right? And he's nameless, he's not part of your world, but one night we had about a dozen calls about a drunk in the middle of Church Street. And we were busy, and the calls just kept coming in and coming in. So finally I said, "We've got to call somebody in. There's something obviously going on Church Street." And so when the guy got there, the woman was in labor. There was a lady having a baby on the street, but everybody just drove around, right? because you get these blinders on, you get this sense of this is what it is, and that's how it's going to, you know, and I'm not, so if you don't take the time to stop and investigate it, and keep yourself safe. Nothing to like open up the, you know, the window and say, oh, it's a woman and she looks like she's in labor. I guess she's not drunk, right? But on the same hand, we had this fellow, he liked being in jail. So we were his family. So he would call us. He's gone now, so I can chat about him a little bit. He would call us and go, can you come and get me? No, we can't come and get you. You're safe. You're in your house. No, but I'm lonely. I want to go to jail. No, we're not coming to get you. All of a sudden, bing bong, the doorbell's ringing. Open up, it's him. He's covered in snow. I go, what are you doing? Well, he said, you wouldn't go and get me, so I went and laid in the intersection hoping that somebody would call me in. And everybody just kept driving around me. He said, so I'm here. I'm just going to ring the doorbell. Let me in here. So there's some humor to it that you take away from it.
She can talk for next year's
Yeah.
book. That's part 2.
All right. Yeah, as long as you. Yes.
Chapter 2.
What's that?
Chapter 2.
Yes, my Gwen story is a good one. When taught you first aid, and then like the next day, your poor husband gets his thumb in the splitter. Remember that? Remember when he put his hand in his thumb in the splitter? Maybe it was so traumatic for him. Because the next day or a week later or whatever, he put his leg by his head, he's like, come home, and his thumb's wide open. It didn't matter if I had first aid, he's going to the hospital. I wasn't fixing that.
Have you written a book, Leslie? Have you written a book or? Oh, okay.
No, the one thing I do own up to now is that I'm dyslexic, so I couldn't write a book to save my soul. So I'm a good speaker. What comes out of my mouth comes out pretty well. If I try to put anything down, like again, it's not something I ever used to like to talk about because it was a deficiency, right? That I would look upon myself. But now I tell people because when I send you a text message, or if I send a piece of something that I write to you and it doesn't look good, it's because it looked fine to me when I wrote it, but what I type and how I think, and Elizabeth found that out quite quickly, right? And so I'm good with talking about it now because lots of people have to live with that. And there's lots of dyslexic people. There's different levels of dyslexia, right?
Different kinds, too.
Different kinds. And so, you know what? I don't hide behind that anymore. I'm not a good writer. I work hard at it. I can't spell with a fiddler's darn, but I find out now that from listening to 2 teachers at ceramics last night that they've got lots of great tricks of the trades now for teaching kids how to spell, and so that's great. For me, they just told my mother I needed more phonics. So after school every day I got to do phonics. It didn't really help, but it's a little bit. George Eden's old grandmother rode a horse home yesterday. That's how I know to spell geography, right? So,
Accommodate 2 cots and 2 mats.
right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's how I remember it.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you for listening to me.
I think we all deserve, you deserve a great round of applause.
Here's live feed. So
Well, it's actually being recorded because we were having problems getting the live feed, so but it is going to be going up, a video of it, so, sorry. I love Richard. We can cut parts out, you know.
Aiden doesn't follow anything I do, so I can talk about him. But I have to be careful with Kelly because she does do
Thank
this.
you all for coming tonight. Next week, we have Sherry. Pearson's going to be talking to us about her travels around the world as a young person on her summer vacation, and then last year with a mother-daughter trip to South Africa.
Wow.
So that's going to be an interesting one if you want to come. And the following week after that is Crystal Colt. She'll be talking about her 1,500-kilometer walk in Spain, her pilgrimage. Took her 2 months to do it. That's something I just love to do. And then the final one is on the last Thursday, and it's Liz Durrett from Saskatoon. She did a TED Talk last year at the University of Saskatchewan. She's going to come and talk about what it's like, to get picked and the training that took place and what it took to do that TED Talk. Because lots of people love TED
I
Talks.
remember the TikTok, yes.
Yeah, so, and she's a Métis woman and her TED Talk was on diversity. So that's an awesome one to talk about. So again, thank you for coming. Just as you guys know, because I always have to do a little plug here, the library does have a 50-50 going on right now. Tickets are one for $5. There's 1,000 tickets sold. We'll be doing the draw just before Christmas. I hate to say that word, but Christmas is coming on December 18th. And so if you want to buy a ticket while you're here and you don't actually often come to the library, Lisa there can sell you a ticket. Other than that, come back some other time. We'll be having them until they're sold out. And we did sell our last one. So again, thank you everybody for coming. Hope you enjoyed yourself. It's cold out there. I did turn off the temperature, but it didn't seem to come up much.